Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mirav. I'm a Director of Marketing in Cyber6Skill. With me is Benji Premier, who's a Senior Product Manager. Just a few admin things before I hand it over to Benji for the webinar. So this session is recorded. We will send the recorded version at the end of the webinar to everybody that participates, and also to the one that will need to leave us maybe before the end. You have an option to ask questions in the Q&A section. Please, if during the webinar you have any question, please write it down in the Q&A section, and at the end of the webinar, Benji will answer all your questions. The chat is also open, so if you want to chat or say anything during the webinar, please feel free to do it. And Benji, take over.
Hey guys, thank you for joining today's webinar about a day in the life of a hacker, how to get inside the mind of a threat actor. Just a quick note about myself, Benji Preminger. I'm a Senior Product Manager at Cyber6Skill. Been with the company for over 5 years now, and looking forward to today's presentation. Hopefully you get a lot out of it in terms of value to improving your defense, cybersecurity, and threat intelligence practices specifically. So why do we really need to get into the attacker mindset? Well, the simple reason is really we need to be effective in our cybersecurity and cyber defense posture. And getting into that attacker mindset and really understanding the TTPs, the tools, tactics, and procedures, and the motivations behind malicious threat actors is really critical to be preemptive, to not just be reactive to attacks, but really be proactive in the way you're defending your organization, your company, your own personal security. And it ultimately translates to not only faster response to attacks, but really less attacks overall. So really being that sort of forward defense in depth type of approach is really key to having a very effective and useful cybersecurity and threat intelligence strategy. To do this, today we'll be using one very well-known framework, the Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain. As the name suggests, invented by Lockheed Martin, a well-known US-based defense company. And it outlines the 7 stages of a potential attack. And really the main use for it, I think, is to sort of framing how an attack might happen, what are the general steps threat actors take to pursue an attack. And while you know, the sort of usual definition, it's used to defend against sophisticated cyber threats or advanced persistent threats, nation-state actors, I think it is useful as a sort of general conceptual framework that I think if you're on the security side, the threat intelligence side, it really helps sort of wrap your head around how threat actors often operate in executing an attack. And then specifically, we'll highlight in today's presentation how it can actually be used to effectively improve your own cybersecurity posture, your own threat intelligence practices. And of course, as we just referenced, it's also a useful way of getting into the attacker mindset. We'll see and run through every one of these 7 steps, from reconnaissance through weaponization, delivery, exploitation of the system, installation of malware, controlling the impacted system using a command and control system, and then of course actions on objective, what the threat actor actually does with the information, the control, the data that he's getting out of the impacted system. So let's start with our fictional threat actor today. Let's all meet Boris. Hey, Boris, he's an introverted Russian hacker living in a quiet suburb outside of Moscow. He likes pizza, smoking imported cigarettes, and of course, attacking American enterprises for profit. So I think that last piece is a key point, right? He's not a hacktivist. He's not some sort of nation state actor. He's not motivated by ideology. It's a very simple and probably the more common attack motivation. The guy's just looking to make money. He's looking to make a quick buck, attack relatively easy targets, and then make profit in whatever way he can with whatever results he gets from his specific attack. And so we go to the first phase of the cyber kill chain, which is reconnaissance. And that's where the threat actor is looking to scope out the environment and choose whichever target he's going to attack and what methods he's actually going to target them. So it could be network scanning, it could be harvesting for credentials and so on. And so specific examples would be, for example, compromised credentials. He could go on a deep web source like Best Carding World, where you can just get those initial credentials to both find low-hanging fruit type of victims where they have a lot of compromised credentials you can use to get that initial access point for an attack. Or you can choose to do spear phishing. A lot of ways he can get that initial reconnaissance point from those types of data. Stealer malware logs, a very, very, very common both reconnaissance and infiltration tool nowadays. For those folks who don't know, stealer malware, these malware that are installed on victim computers and essentially swipe all of the data on the computer, usually from some sort of browser like Google Chrome, and then all of your, whether it's Netflix or Spotify account data, but also account data for, internal corporate portals, Salesforce, Jira, Confluence, every single sort of account system you have access to, that gets filtered out using a stealer malware, and then it gets sold off in markets, these initial access broker markets like Russian market. So that's a very, very common way for hackers to get that initial access point, like the name suggests. As a small point, by the way, that's a very common initial access point for a lot of ransomware attacks. So oftentimes you see that initial stealer log being posted on a market like Russian market, and then maybe a couple weeks later you actually hear about a well-known ransomware attack, and sort of you can retroactively see, oh, okay, that actual victim's credentials, stealer logs were offered up for sale a couple of weeks earlier. Whoops. Beyond stealer logs, exposed devices, again, another way of threat actors reconning potential targets. Shodan, a very, very well-known tool out there that's sort of like the Google for connected devices, allows both security researchers and, unfortunately, threat actors to search for exposed devices. It could be things like physical hardware, cameras, printers, but oftentimes software, whether it's open ports or other types of exposed devices that really allow threat actors to find, okay, this is a potential internal sign-in page or something like that that allows me as a threat actor to exploit them. And of course, another common attack vector and a way of reconning is vulnerable software, right? So maybe in aggregation with previous systems or methods of operation, a threat actor may go to somewhere like ExploitDB or Exploit Database, a well-known source for vulnerabilities in their actual exploit codes, and can also use these to identify and find a vulnerable target. After all of this work, great success for Boris. He's actually found an easy target, Acme, an American telecom or telecommunication giant. So now at this stage, Boris has picked out his main target. He's found some ways of sort of specifically targeting them. And now he's moving on to the weaponization phase where really Boris is picking a cyber attack vector, right? So in this phase, the weaponization, the attacker is really looking to pick their mode of operation and then create that specific attack vector. It could be remote access malware, ransomware, a virus, a worm that can exploit known vulnerabilities. A lot of ways that he can pick to exploit the target. Boris is a aficionado of malware, and he's faced with the very, very common choice that a lot of us face in the software and security space. Do we build or do we buy, right? Will Boris actually build or code his own custom version of malware? Or is he simply gonna buy sort of an off-the-shelf, quote unquote, malware? And I think in a lot of cases, especially given that Boris is a financially motivated threat actor, he's looking to make relatively a quick buck. And even though he could have written his own brand of malware, he's choosing to use one that's available for sale in the underground, in this case, in an underground forum. So he's looking to get Venom software, which even if it may be pretending to be some sort of legitimate software, we're seeing that it's offering very, very specific capabilities. Let's say provide a plethora of tools for a hacker to gain control of and really manage and exploit a lot of aspects of an infected system. We're seeing things like access to the startup manager, remote desktop, running shell commands, hidden processes, and so on. A lot of tools and capabilities that are really geared at the common threat actor. And we're seeing that in this specific case, in the forum, in the dark web forum post where this was offered, we're seeing that the threat actors also provided us with an anti-scan. So this is where they're showing us, okay, this specific bit of malware has actually been missed by all but 2 antivirus vendors. So in this case, if the suspect system or the system that Boris is, in this case, is looking to target, if they're using Fortinet, for example, or Bitdefender, or any of a great number of antivirus vendors, this specific malware will not be detected at the time that this was posted. So great, Boris has found a malware that he's looking to use. He knows that it's most likely going to pass the defenses of Acme, of his chosen victim target. And now he's looking to find how to actually get it on Acme's system. So he's picked out his target, he's picked out the malware, and now he moves on to the delivery phase. And this is where he's looking to find a very weak point in the system. And as a lot of us know, probably the most common weakness in any organization is honestly the human element. Phishing attacks, very common, social engineering, which we'll talk about in a second, but whenever someone opens something, clicks something, downloads something, that's something that's very difficult to defend against. And this is where a lot of threat actors are finding ripe opportunities to attack organizations. So in this case, Boris, knowing that this is a very easy way of infiltrating an organization, went to his favorite deep web forum, found a big USA and UK data leak where he's looking to find credentials belonging to Acme, his chosen target. So he downloaded this huge data leak. He saw a bunch of folders providing a lot of data records and specific PII, or personally identifiable information. He opened one of the tables. Obviously, I've obfuscated the information here. And he's seeing that besides the company name, he's finding the email and a lot of various other bits of information. He's searching through the table. He found some information belonging to Acme. And now he's really moving to delivering his bit of malware. What's the most common way, or one of the most common ways I've referenced earlier? Phishing, or spear phishing in this case, right? Boris is looking to trick a specific employee from Acme to download a malware infected file. So he's mimicking as if he's from Acme Finance, and he's sending again a fake email to John Smith from Acme Finance saying, "Dear John, we've noticed something odd. Do you mind checking the attached PDF?" Obviously, the PDF is infected with a malware. John, being unsuspecting and maybe not up to date in his cybersecurity training, opened the file, executed it, and then the malware is moving on to the next phase of actual exploitation. So this is where social engineering comes into play, right? Social engineering essentially tricking someone to divulge information and do some sort of action that compromises the system, sometimes abbreviated as SE. Very, very common attack vector used by threat actors, both as part of a very, very advanced APT attack, and also for sort of run-of-the-mill, middle-of-the-road type hackers. So John Smith, the unsuspecting victim, clicked on the PDF, and the malware is now moving on to the exploitation phase. It's executed in the victim system and the installation phase, phase 5 of the cyber kill chain, where the malware is actually installed in the system. So at this point, we've covered up to step 5, where Boris found his victim company. He found his tool of choice in the weaponization phase. He delivered it using a social engineering attack, specifically spear phishing an employee of Acme using downloaded credentials from the dark web. And now the malware is being actively exploiting and installed in the system, and Boris has full control of the system. And this is really where we're getting into the meat and potatoes of the attack, where Boris is in control of the infected computer, right? So Venom is installed, in this case, on Acme's system. And in this situation, now that it's latched onto the individual computer, it's now both expanding reach inside the network and creating more backdoors for future use. So it means that it's accessing folders on the network, shared folders, access to various servers, cloud infrastructure, financial, HR records, legal records, of course, PII, and all of these different types of systems that allow Boris to control the network and exfiltrate as much data as possible. And this is where really Boris, again, is in full control of the system, is able to monitor virtually anything that's happening in the system. And it is, from an organization perspective, this is as bad as it gets from this situation because, Boris is everywhere. In this case, the threat actor is really, got us good in that respect. We go on to the next and final stage, and this is where we said Boris has full access to the victim network, and he's now looking to act on his objectives, right? We said Boris is not ideology motivated, he's not an activist. This is where Boris is really looking to make a buck. He's profit motivated. So two common ways of threat actors doing this, and this is what Boris chooses to do. One is to offer up the sale of the access itself, the control of the system, in an underground auction. In this case, Forum Exploit, a very well-known underground forum, is an infamous venue for these initial access brokers, these vendors that are giving that initial access point to launch more sophisticated and advanced attacks. We're seeing he's offering it up, and this is very common way for threat actors to list these types of illicit offerings. He's describing the company, revenue $12 billion, located in the US, telecom enterprise, and he's listing what's the starting price, $1,500. We're seeing the step, which it's sort of underground slang for saying what's the bid tiers. So next bid would be $2,000, $2,500, and so on. And if you're really, intent on buying this compromised access, you can just immediately pay $3,000, and just like buy it now on eBay, you can immediately buy it without any auction. So you notice that in these types of auctions in the underground, the threat actors don't tell the name of the actual company, but you can see what type of access is offered, of course, the price, and what type of company it is. And so from a threat actor perspective, other hackers, probably more advanced groups, would buy it to specifically target both a geographic location, a size of company, and a type of company, because it also illustrates to the threat actors what type of gain they can make out of it, right? Telecommunication company may be more willing to, accept a ransomware fee and pay it out. If it's a federal or government entity, maybe less so. Maybe there's more sensitive data on a government type access, and then it would be more of a nation state type threat that's looking to buy it. But from Boris's perspective, he's just looking to sell it. $3,000, $1,500, not that big in terms of underground sales, but of course, being a Russian hacker and having invested relatively little time in this attack, great profit for him. So that's the first way Boris is going to be monetizing this type of data. The second way is where he's looking to monetize it by using customer credit card data on underground credit card markets. So underground, deep and dark web, rife with these markets selling compromised credit cards. Boris looked at the system, looked at Acme's data, and found a lot of credit card records, corporate credit cards, and now he's sort of doubling down on his stolen data approach and just selling those compromised credit cards in the underground as well. So he's both making a buck off selling the compromised access itself, as well as more specifically on bits of data he's found inside the compromised system. We're seeing that, again, in this actions on objective, this is where the threat actor is really dependent on all the steps preceding it. And from a defender perspective, this is where we're looking at what was the initial motivation of the threat actor. So while the weaponization through the command and control steps might be more similar across a broader variety of attacks, actions on objectives is really tied to, again, the attacker mindset and the attacker motivation. If we're looking at nation states, it might be not necessarily selling the data, but actually just using the data for a geopolitical purpose. If it's more of a ransomware motivation, that would be, again, more of a gain profit situation. If it's run of the mill, it's going to be fairly quick, like Boris, just selling it off in a couple of ways, getting rid of it and moving on. And I think, again, from the defender perspective, the problem with this is that it's not only defending against Boris in this case for the initial attack. Now that the data is being further compromised, both in terms of the compromised access and the credit cards, the damage is done twice over. And now you're having to trace both the dark web access being sold on the left-hand side and seeing where it actually ended up in, and the compromised credit cards where you have to understand which cards were compromised, blocking them likely, seeing if they've already been compromised, and trying to retract the sales, and so on. So let's talk about where the deep and dark web really came into play in this attack. And really that's, I think, goes throughout all stages of the attack. So on the recon phase, we're seeing how Boris reconned the target using deep and dark web data. In this case, he was looking at compromised credentials, and he was scoping out the target that has very quote unquote fresh, up-to-date credentials. He found that unsuspecting victim and targeted him that way. He's bought malware from an underground forum, right? We talked about Venom malware, a well-known and easily accessible strain of malware that was undetected by most antivirus vendors. Again, he found that specific employee, again, using lists from deep and dark web markets that he found to perform that specific phishing or spear phishing attack. He then sold compromised access on forum exploit in that deep and dark web market or forum. And he then also sold the compromised customer credit card data in an underground credit card market. So again, throughout the stage, the deep and dark web, the cyber underground, was a key component in Boris being able to buy specific bits of data, intelligence, and tools to execute the attack, as well as acting on his objective and then selling the data in the underground as well. So it's all part of that ecosystem that allowed Boris and other threat actors to both exploit and attack victims, as well as actually making a profit off of the compromised access and the data. The good and bad news, and this is where Cybersixtica comes in, is that we have all that data available. So every bit of data that I referenced today was actually sourced from forums and marketplaces and credit card markets and so on that we provide in the system. Here is a screenshot of the individual intel items, forum posts, and so on from our portal. And all of this is available from a investigative and alerting perspective, historic data and real-time data available as well. So what are the key takeaways I hope we're all taking from today's conversation? So we went through all 7 steps of the cyber kill chain, which is, as we said, a very useful framework for mapping the various stages of a cyber attack, right? So while attacks can happen in a broad variety of ways, it's very useful to think about it in a more structured way, whether, again, you're CTI, threat intelligence folks, whether you're more on the IT side, or let's say broader security, SOC, incident response, threat hunting, of course. It's a great way of really wrapping your head around how an attack might happen and where you can protect yourself. I think the obvious sort of conclusion from it that it's easier and more effective to stop attacks the further up you are the kill chain, right? If you've only discovered the attack once you've seen the data being compromised and sold on an underground market, not good, right? You're already, you know, the damage has mostly been done. Threat actors may have already bought your data in the dark web. While if you're just noting that you have compromised credentials out there in the recon phase, you're much better able to protect yourself against, because you can, of course, block any passwords that have been leaked out, improve security and training around spear phishing attempts. If you're thinking about malware in the weaponization phase, maybe you can beef up your antivirus protection in terms of which malware is being defended against and so on. So the more and earlier and more proactive you're being able to be, the better you are at not just, you know, reacting to threats, but really being proactive and stopping them in their heels. And threat intelligence, of course, is a key component of it. We talked about how the deep and dark web ecosystem around it is a key component to not just our defense as a cybersecurity community, but from the attacker perspective, from in this case, Boris' perspective, the deep and dark web was a key component, and that whole ecosystem was key to Boris's and other threat actors' success in exploiting targets. And so from a defense perspective, threat intelligence is key to detecting those compromised credentials, understanding what malware are out there so you can defend themselves, you can defend yourself, and seeing various postings to see not only how you're being targeted, but also how your peers are targeted, what trends are happening in the underground, so you can defend yourself better, so you can be more aware of the threat landscape and improve your security posture overall. I'm happy to take questions. I see already some questions now. Before I pause that, if you do want to learn more, please make sure to contact us at info@cyber6kill.com and hit me up on LinkedIn. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions. I see already some questions in the Q&A. Mirav, stop me if I can see already one question. Let me look it up.
Yeah, do you want to look it up? Or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, I can read it. Should pen testers and ethical hackers be checking these dark web forums to see if there's a malware or compromised data from their company available to threat actors? Yeah, for sure. So I think certainly the pen test, you know, honestly, I think threat intelligence is valuable not just for the you know, hardcore CTI crowd, but also folks who are maybe getting it more as augmented intelligence to enhance their practices. So certainly pen testers, ethical hackers are you know, a great use case for using deep and dark web forum data. You know, it could be forums, it could be closed access Telegram groups, QQ, ICQ, whatever the case may be, to get that I guess additional deeper understanding of the threat landscape and the types of activities and tools being used but in the underground in general. And then specifically, I think it's a great way, you know, us at Cyber6kill, we have a good number of clients who are using that to beef up their securities and run simulations and things like that to see what is my exposure as an organization in the underground, right? And it could be as simple as compromised credentials, it could be stealer logs, it could be discussions about CVEs that I have that I know, and how's that impacting my increased risk as a result of it. If I have a specific CVE, is the risk of exploitation by that CVE greater or higher based on publication of POC exploit codes and chatter in the underground, etc.
I have two more questions, Benji.
Yeah, please.
The first, beside deep and dark web intelligence, what role does clear web intelligence play?
Great. So there's a couple of ways, and I think, you know, at the end of the day, both from an overall threat intelligence perspective and certainly from the Cyber6kill perspective, our goal is to provide threat intelligence solutions and data. And so not necessarily oftentimes, but a good amount of times, it's not necessarily that deep and dark web data, even though it is a key component of what we provide, but clear web data is also very, very useful. I mentioned the CVE and vulnerability piece. Certainly a lot of POC exploits, for example, are published on GitHub as one example, or a lot of relevant security research is published on Twitter or honestly, Hacktivism, Threats Anonymous, a lot of it is published on Twitter. Or, for example, a lot of great research is coming out on security blogs. Krebs on Security, a well-known one that I think everyone nowadays is using. Krebs, great source for threat intelligence and deeper level analysis. A lot of great security vendors and advisories out there, and all of that is available inside Cybersec as well to really understand what is out there, analysis of the threat landscape. And honestly, you can also think about it from the attacker perspective. Attackers certainly have access to clear web data, research, and of course, things like POC exploit codes and other sort of nefarious publications on sources like Twitter. So the same way they have access to it, you have access to it, and vice versa. So both from a research perspective, I think it's very useful, as well as from the types of malicious activity that is actually happening in the clear web, not just in the deep or dark web. Great question.
One more question. What other frameworks do you find useful?
So Cyber Kill Chain, very useful and well-known one. I think the other big, the big well-known as the MITRE ATT&CK framework. ATT&CK is very, very useful, very, very common. It's I would say it's slightly more, I don't know if necessarily complex, but more higher resolution than the Cyber Kill Chain. It still has higher level steps, attacks and tactics, but over each step, there's sort of sub-steps and specific ways with which attackers may use, or types of attack vectors that they may choose to target a specific victim. We also, by the way, inside our data as well, we also map events and vulnerabilities, APTs and malware to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, specific tactics and techniques, because we know a lot of organizations, again, frame the types of threats they may face and their cybersecurity posture overall based on attack, based on the MITRE tactics and techniques out there.
Great. There is one more question. Is there something unique about how Cybersec collects deep and dark web data?
Okay, another great question allows me to plug some specific pieces I'm in charge of inside the product. So I think generally collecting from closed access communities and places that are inherently malicious, illegal in nature, and are trying to kick out threat intelligence vendors like ourselves is inherently difficult. It's a great tech challenge, and I think this is where we really shine as a company. It's really using sophisticated technology to evade detection by for example, forum admins, and maintaining that persistent and comprehensive collection. So we collect full 100% automatically, near real time. Oftentimes it's a matter of minutes till you see the data in the portal. We maintain it at a persistent level because you really want to make sure you're evading detection. And we also collect historically. So once a forum is onboarded as a source, we collect every bit of data that ever existed on that source, even if the source is shut down, closed, shut down by law enforcement, whatever the case may be. We still have access to the data forever. And you as a security practitioner have access. So you're able to connect data points across time, potentially, for example, raid forums, a forum that existed a couple of years ago. Maybe a threat actor was operating there. He used specific TTPs, or tools, techniques, and procedures to attack victims. Then that threat actor moved on to a new existing forum using the same alias, different pseudonym, but you're able to now see, okay, even though this actor targeted me now, I can see that 5 years ago, they were going under this different alias, using those tactics. Okay, now I know how to better defend myself because I have that historical perspective. Otherwise, if you're thinking about manual methods of collection, I mentioned earlier Russian market, a well-known Stealer log market. That market has hundreds of thousands of items being shared every month. And so trying to manually parse out and detect pieces of data there is extremely difficult. And especially if you think about markets where data that's sold no longer appears there anymore, really that ability to automate collection at scale is key to our customers, right? To have that real-time and comprehensive collection of data. Thanks
Great.
for that question.
Another question. What's some advice for script kiddies and people interested in InfoSec to transition to full-time pen testing and ethical hacking position?
So that's a good question. I would say that I think there's a lot of great online learning that can happen out there. I'm not going to recommend specific vendors or venues, but I think a quick Google search can certainly show that. And honestly, if you're looking at some professional specific advice, if you see on LinkedIn, for example, professionals that you appreciate or want to sort of emulate in your career path, you can contact them and then also see what type of learning experience they had and then try to emulate that as well.
Great. So we have some more questions.
Mm-hmm.
How far back does your data go? Do you see ACME company dumps from 10 years ago?
Yeah, so Acme in this example, yeah.
Sorry,
so no, all good. So yeah, we store all the data we collect forever. And let's say we onboarded a forum that existed 25 years ago, it's somewhat unlikely, but let's say there's a forum that's been active for 25 years or something like that. Yeah, we store all of the data from as far back as it goes. So if a company existed or if a company was mentioned in a forum post 15 years ago, we'll still have that forum post.
Good. And from the same person related, what is the data retention within your system? How long do you keep the collected data?
So again, if it's for example, a forum post, we keep the data because those data points are significant, right? If a forum post was edited or deleted, but it still maintained critical data, you know, we still, whether it did contain critical data or not, we still keep it because of that historical perspective, right? And really, you know, looping back to the title of today's conversation, getting into the attacker mindset, we really want to understand who is the threat actor now, but what they did 5 years ago has significant intelligence value from a defense perspective, because we see a lot of times threat actors either evolve or sometimes they keep maintaining that same methodology. And also the type of potentially significant digital clues they left might be critical, right? Potentially a threat actor shared 5 years ago a specific Jabber address, an ICQ handle, something like that. It really allows a threat intelligence or cybersecurity practitioner to pick up those clues, detect their activity, their forum post, their Telegram chat, or whatever the case may be, across all those different sources, and piece together an intelligence picture that really allows you, from a defending perspective, understand, okay, this is how they're operating, this is what I should now do to defend against.
Great. And I think we are done. Unless anyone else wants to ask another question, you can also raise your hand. Thank you, everybody, for all your great questions. So I think that we are done. As I said at the beginning, this session was recorded, and I will send the recorded to you very soon. And that's it. Thank you for joining, and looking forward to see you in our next session. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.